Hello and welcome, dear listeners. The station was a silent outpost, a fragile wheel of steel suspended against the void. It circled the black hole like a moth trapped in eternal orbit. From the observation deck, the singularity looked deceptively calm, a swirling disk of light bending the stars around it into strange, distorted arcs. But the crew knew better. Inside that horizon, time itself was swallowed whole. I had lived on the station for 3 years, long enough to stop fearing the black hole's pull and start respecting it as something like a god. We were scientists, engineers, explorers, but none of that mattered when you looked into the event horizon. It stripped away your ego and left you with only questions. Time worked differently here. The station was stable, thanks to its orbit, but even so, our clocks never quite agreed. A wristwatch might run slower than the wall chrono. Two people walking the same corridor might swear a conversation lasted 10 seconds. Or 2 minutes. At first, it was little more than an annoyance, something we logged for the physics teams back on Earth. But then came the children. The first was born to Alina, one of the medical staff. A daughter. Healthy, perfect. We named her Sira. For a while, she grew like any child would. Her first laugh, her first steps, the way she clung to her mother's hair with tiny fists. But at her first birthday, something struck us all. She hadn't changed. Not a wrinkle, not a new tooth, not a hint of growth in her bones. Her face remained frozen in that same angelic roundness, her body still that of a newborn. But her eyes had changed. She looked at us with a strange alertness, as though behind those pupils lived not a baby but something watching, something listening. When she spoke, spoke, before her second year we were stunned. The voice was small and halting, but the words were precise. "Why does the black star sing?" She asked me one day while I was measuring her vitals. I dropped the scanner. "Who told you that phrase?" I demanded. Sira only smiled, as if the answer were obvious. "I heard it, at night, when the station is quiet." Her mother thought she was imagining things. The engineers said it was nonsense. But I had heard it, too, sometimes when I lay awake in my bunk. A faint hum in the metal walls, like a vibration crawling through the hull. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. It was the black hole whispering. Sira wasn't the only one. 2 more children were born in the following years, and they too carried the same impossible mark. No aging, no change. As if time itself had been carved out of them. Their minds expanded at terrifying speed. Within months, they read technical logs. By their second birthdays, they could operate the station's consoles better than some of the crew. We started calling them the Timeless. It was a joke at first, a way to mask our unease. But the unease grew. One evening, I found Sira sitting alone at the viewport, staring at the abyss. I asked her what she was looking at. "The eye," she said. "What eye?" She pointed at the black hole. "It watches us. It knows me." Her voice was steady, too steady for a child of 3 years who still looked like an infant. That night, I wrote in my log, "The children are not immune to time. They are outside of it." The crew began to whisper about consequences. Were they mutations, accidents of physics, or something more deliberate? Had the black hole done this to them? Or were we witnessing the birth of something beyond human? We didn't have answers. Not yet. But deep down, each of us felt the same dread. The station was no longer just a research outpost. It was a cradle. And whatever was growing inside it was not ours to control. Life aboard the station had always been routine, almost monotonous, endless data streams, experiments on gravity, the hum of recycled air. But after the children, routine was impossible. They were 3 now. Sira, born first, Kyle, the second, and little Amara, the youngest. Together, they formed a presence that unsettled every crew member. They didn't run through the corridors like ordinary children, didn't play with toys or cry for comfort. Instead, they spoke in hushed voices, often to one another, sometimes to us. And when they did, their words carried the weight of knowledge that shouldn't belong to being still in cradles. At 2 years old, Kale could already perform orbital mechanics on the station's consoles. I once found him adjusting a star chart, aligning our coordinates against a shifting backdrop of warped starlight. When I asked how he knew what he was doing, he simply said, "I remember." "Remember what?" I pressed. "The way it was before the fall," he whispered. Then, before I could question him, he wandered away, leaving me cold. The crew started avoiding them. People lowered their voices when the children passed, their eyes filled with unease. Alina, Sira's mother, tried to defend them. "They're just gifted," she insisted. "Prodigies. The environment here changes everything." But no one believed her. Even she couldn't ignore that Sierra, after 3 years, still looked like a newborn. The same soft skin, the same tiny body, the same unblinking eyes. And yet, her words cut deeper than any adult's could. I'll never forget the day she approached Commander Rhodes, the station's leader. He had been standing in the command deck, reviewing telemetry. Sierra walked in silently, stood beside him, and said, "You shouldn't go to sleep tonight." The commander frowned. "Why not?" "You'll stop breathing," she said simply. He laughed at first, brushing it off as a child's nonsense. But Rhodes was found dead in his bunk that very night. His lungs collapsed from a sudden embolism no one could have predicted. After that, fear became law on the station. Some of the crew began to whisper that the children weren't children at all, that they were vessels for something else. A few claimed the black hole had reached into their blood, rewired their DNA, turned them into conduits. Others feared something darker, that they were the black hole itself, fragments of its consciousness given form. And the children seemed aware of the fear. They didn't laugh, didn't cry. They only watched, silent and unblinking, as if cataloging our every thought. Sometimes I swore they looked through us, not at us, their gazes fixed on some future horizon. The more I observed, the more I noticed a pattern. When they gathered together, their voices would lower into a kind of harmony, like the murmur of a choir. At first, I thought they were playing, but when I recorded the sound, I nearly dropped the playback device. It wasn't random chatter. It was a frequency. The hum matched the faint vibration I had once heard in the station's hull. The same resonance, I believed, came from the black hole itself. The children weren't imitating it. They were echoing it. One night, unable to sleep, I walked the corridors until I reached the viewport. There they were, all three of them, sitting cross-legged, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of the singularity. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Listening," Amara said softly. "To what?" The silence between the seconds. I froze. They tilted their heads in perfect unison, as if hearing something I could not. Their lips curved into faint, knowing smiles. That was when I realized it wasn't just that they weren't aging. It was something far stranger. The children weren't bound to time at all. They stood outside of it, peering into its flow like someone gazing into a river from the shore. They saw its currents, its bends, its endings. And they knew where each of us would be swept away. The rest of us lived within the current. They lived beyond it. And we were terrified of what that meant. By the 3rd year of their presence, no one denied it anymore. The children knew things. Not guesses, not coincidences. Certainties. Kale once told an engineer not to use the plasma torch in Bay 6. "The seal will fail," he said, voice calm and detached. The engineer scoffed, muttering about superstition. But later that shift, the torch ruptured, spitting fire across the bay. If Kale hadn't spoken, 3 people would have died. Another time, Amara asked one of the botanists, "Why are you sad about your sister?" The botanist froze. She had never spoken of her family to anyone on the station. Hours later, a delayed transmission arrived from Earth. Her sister had died. At first, we called them coincidences, then patterns, then prophecies. But it wasn't prophecy. The children weren't predicting. They were remembering. That was the most unsettling part. Whenever I pressed them, their answers were the same. "I remember it." "How can you remember something that hasn't happened yet?" I once asked Sierra. Her eyes flicked to the viewport, the black hole swirling in the distance. "Because it already has. Just not for you." The words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Some of the crew began keeping records of everything the children said. They filled pages with fragments, warnings, whispers, strange questions. It read like a code we couldn't crack. "The station will fall. The black star remembers us all." The end began before the beginning. It was Kale who first mentioned the whispers. "They come when the lights go dark," he told me. "Voices in the metal. They tell us stories." "What kind of stories?" I asked. "Of the stars that died," he said simply. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and in his 2 bright eyes, I felt something that wasn't human staring back. That night, I stayed awake, lying in my bunk. At first, all I heard was the steady hum of the station. Then, faintly, I caught a vibration deep in the walls, not mechanical, not natural. A sound that carried patterns like a chorus sung from another world. I pressed my hand against the bulkhead and the hum crawled into my skin. It wasn't words, not exactly, but I felt meaning in it, like the shadow of a thought brushing my mind. I pulled back, heart pounding. The next morning, I found the children waiting outside my quarters. You heard it, Sierra said. I didn't answer. You will hear more? Kale added. And Amara, smiling faintly, whispered, It knows you now. The crew grew divided. Half argued the children were gifts, proof that the singularity was more than a cosmic void, that it could teach us, guide us. The others believed we were cursed, that we had invited something into our lives we couldn't hope to understand. Arguments broke out in the mess hall, in the labs, in the narrow corridors where whispers carried too easily. Fear does strange things in close quarters, especially when every glance at the viewport reminded us of the abyss waiting outside. One night, during a heated debate, Sierra climbed onto a chair and silenced us all with a single word. Stop. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that froze every throat. She looked at us with those eternal eyes and said, The singularity doesn't like your noise. The chills ran through me. The room went silent. No one spoke. No one dared. Later, I asked her what she meant. She tilted her head, as though listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she said softly, It whispers to us because it is lonely. A black hole, lonely. The idea should have been absurd. But in that moment, with her gaze locked on mine, it didn't feel absurd at all. It felt terrifying. And for the first time since arriving at the station, I realized the black hole wasn't just a force of nature. It was aware. And through the children, it had found its voice. The station had always been fragile, a tin can orbiting a monster, held together by steel and trust. When trust broke, the steel no longer mattered. After Commander Rhodes' death, after the children's whispers grew undeniable, the crew divided into two camps. On one side were the Protectors, scientists, dreamers, and a few desperate souls who saw the children as a miracle. They argued that these timeless ones were humanity's next step, a gift born from the singularity itself. We came here to learn, they said. This is the greatest lesson the universe has ever given us. On the other side were the skeptics, soldiers, engineers, and those who feared what the children represented. To them, the black hole was no teacher, no god. It was a predator, and the children were its bait. They're not human, one mechanic spat. They're the black hole's spies, and we're fools to keep them alive. The station became a battleground of whispers and stares. Arguments flared over meals, in the labs, even during routine maintenance. Every decision became a fight. Should the children be allowed in the control room? Should they have access to data logs? Should they even be allowed to live? Alina, still clinging to hope, tried to shield them. They're innocent, she pleaded. They didn't ask for this. But innocence was hard to believe when Sierra looked at you and spoke your secrets aloud. When Kale corrected calculations before you even made them. When Amara predicted the exact moment a coolant pipe would burst. The tipping point came during a safety drill. The alarms blared, the station's crew rushing to their posts. Midway through, Kale walked calmly onto the command deck and shut the alarms down with a few strokes of the console. It's pointless, he said. You'll all be dead before the alarms matter. The silence that followed was colder than the void outside. Explain yourself, one officer demanded. Kyle only tilted his head. You don't want to know. The Protectors claimed it was a warning meant to save us. The skeptics called it a threat. Either way, something shifted that day. People stopped sleeping. Conversations turned to escape plans, mutiny, desperate measures. I tried to stay neutral, tried to observe as a scientist should. But it was impossible. Every time I looked into those children's eyes, I saw something looking back at me, not malice, not kindness, something older, something patient. One night, I walked into the hydroponics bay to find Amara alone, sitting among the glowing plants. She looked up as I entered. They'll fight, she said. Who will? I asked. Your people. You and the others. You'll fight about us. Her voice was soft, but her words cut deep. And what happens? I pressed. She hesitated, then whispered, Some of you won't live long enough to know. My stomach turned cold. The next day, the first physical fight broke out. 2 crew members, one protector, one skeptic, collided in the mess hall, fists flying, accusations shouted. You want to worship them. You want to kill children. The chaos spread like fire. It took 3 officers to separate them. The children were there, watching silently from the corner. Not afraid, not surprised, watching like spectators at a play they already knew the ending to. Later, I found Sierra sketching something on a scrap of paper. Not a picture, but a diagram. I leaned closer and froze. It was a map of the station, every deck, every corridor, every maintenance shaft, and in red, she had marked 3 places. What is this? I asked. Where it breaks, she replied simply. The skeptics wanted to confiscate the drawing, lock the children away, maybe even eject them into space. The protectors refused, saying it was proof the children were trying to save us. And so the station fractured further, the rift widening with each passing hour. I stood in the middle, caught between fear and wonder, between science and survival. But deep inside, I knew one thing. The children weren't dividing us. We were dividing ourselves. And they were only waiting for the moment when the divide would matter most. It began with a whisper, the kind you dismiss at first, the kind you pray is just imagination. Sira was the one who spoke it. She had always been the quietest of the three, her dark eyes fixed on things no one else could see. That morning, she walked into the command deck during a routine systems check, clutching a strip of paper in her hand. She handed it to me without a word. On it, in shaky pencil lines, was a single sentence, "The stars will go dark at 03:17, I frowned. What does this mean? She didn't answer. She only tapped the corner of the console clock and walked away. The crew was already on edge from the fights, the mistrust, the sense that the station was a powder keg waiting for a spark. So when I showed them the note, it became the spark. Some scoffed. "Childish nonsense," said Captain Hale, though his hands trembled as he set the paper down. Others leaned in close, whispering among themselves. What if it's true? What if she knows something we don't? Arguments erupted again, skeptics calling it manipulation, protectors calling it revelation. And in the middle, the children sat silent, as if they had already spoken all that needed to be said. As the hours crept closer to Zor 3717, the tension grew unbearable. People abandoned their workstations, crowding the observation windows that faced the black hole's eerie glow. Some clutched each other's hands. Some stood rigid, jaws tight. I stayed at my console, eyes flicking between the clock and the void. Part of me wanted to dismiss it, to laugh at the paranoia. But another part, the part that had seen Kale stop an alarm, the part that had heard Amara predict the coolant pipe failure, couldn't shake the weight of the words, 03:15. The crew whispered in the dim light, breath shallow, waiting 03:16. A low hum filled the station, the vibration of the generators steady as a heartbeat, 03:17. The lights flickered once, twice, and then every external display went black, the starfield vanished. For a moment, it was as if the universe itself had been erased. No black hole, no stars. Nothing. A scream broke the silence. "Power failure," someone shouted, rushing to a console. But the readings told another story. Systems were still online. Energy was flowing. The blackout wasn't inside the station. It was outside. The stars themselves were gone. Panic tore through the crew. Some pounded on controls, desperate to restore the view. Others backed away from the windows, as if the void might reach in and swallow them whole. And through it all, Sira stood calm, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "It's only for a moment," she said softly. And she was right. At 3D19, the stars returned. One by one, pinpricks of light flared back into existence. The black hole glowed again. The galaxy's tapestry reassembled as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. We all felt it. We had stared into true nothingness. A silence so vast, so absolute, it pressed into our bones. When it was over, chaos erupted. Some fell to their knees, whispering prayers of gratitude. Others shouted in terror, demanding answers. "How could she know? What does it mean? What are they hiding from us?" The skeptics turned vicious. "They caused it," one man screamed, pointing at Sira. "They're controlling the universe itself." The protectors shouted back. "She saved us!" She warned us. The station teetered on the brink of riot. Captain Hale roared for order, his voice echoing down the corridors, but his authority had eroded long ago. The crew didn't look to him anymore. They looked to the children. Later, when the chaos dimmed, I cornered Sira in the hydroponics bay. "How did you know?" I asked her. She tilted her head, eyes distant. "We don't know. We just remember." "Remember what?" I pressed. She hesitated. "What hasn't happened yet?" The words chilled me to the core. That night, as the crew whispered and argued in their bunks, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The prophecy had come true, and I realized with a sinking dread, if the children could foretell the darkness of the stars, what else might they know? And worse, what else were they waiting for? The blackout changed everything. In the hours that followed, the station wasn't just divided, it was fractured. Whispers filled the air like smoke in a burning room. Everyone was asking the same questions. What are the children? How could they have known? And what else do they know that they aren't telling us? The skeptics weren't whispering anymore. They shouted, they riled people up, They demanded action. Captain Hale tried to steady the crew, but his voice no longer carried the weight it once did. Authority had shifted, invisible and unstoppable, away from him and toward the children. It was inevitable. Fear always needs a target, and the children became that target. It began in the mess hall. I was there when the first spark lit the fire. Two skeptics cornered Amara as she walked past the food dispensers. Their voices were low, sharp, filled with venom. "You knew it would happen, didn't you?" one hissed. "You made it happen." Amara just looked at them, her small frame dwarfed by their bulk. "We didn't make anything," she said softly. That only enraged them more. One slammed his fist against the steel wall, rattling the cutlery. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. "They're dangerous," he shouted to the room. "They're manipulating us, controlling the ship, playing with our lives like we're nothing." Protectors leapt to their feet, shoving chairs aside, voices rising in defense. "Without them, we'd already be dead," someone yelled back. In seconds, the hall exploded into chaos. Shouts, accusations, fists slamming tables. It was as though the blackout had burned away the last of our fragile unity. That night, the skeptics made their move. I was jolted awake by the sound of alarms. Red lights pulsed in the corridors. Footsteps thundered past my bunk. Grabbing my jacket, I stumbled into the hall just in time to see two armed men sprinting toward the children's quarters. "No!" I shouted, chasing after them. By the time I caught up, the fight had already broken out. The Protectors had formed a barricade outside the children's door, pipes and wrenches clutched like weapons. The skeptics came at them in a frenzy, shouting that they'd end this madness once and for all. I shoved through the crowd, yelling for order, but my voice was swallowed in the roar. Metal clanged against metal. Blood sprayed across the wall as a wrench connected with someone's cheek. A skeptic went down screaming, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. Another lunged with a knife, slashing wildly. And through the chaos, the children's door slid open. They stepped out together, Kale, Amara, and Sierra, calm as statues, their eyes glowing faintly in the emergency lights. The fighting froze. It wasn't fear that stopped us. It was something deeper, heavier. Like the air itself had thickened, pressing against our lungs. Every movement, every heartbeat felt slow, syrupy. Cal's voice broke the silence. "You can't hurt us." It wasn't a threat. It was a truth. One of the skeptics, trembling with rage, raised his knife anyway and lunged. He didn't make it 3 steps. His body locked mid-motion, frozen as if time itself had caught him. The knife slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. His eyes bulged in terror, but he couldn't move. The others backed away, stumbling over one another. Amara's voice carried neck soft but unyielding. "We don't want to fight you, but we won't let you destroy us." Sierra stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the stunned crowd. "We remember how this ends." The tension snapped. Protectors rushed to shield the children while the skeptics, pale and shaken, dragged their frozen comrade back, his body slowly thawing into frantic motion. No one won that night, but something broke that could never be repaired. Later, when the alarms were silenced and the halls quieted, I sat in the control room with Captain Hale. He looked 10 years older, his face lined with exhaustion. "We can't hold this together much longer," he muttered. "The crew's at war with itself. Next time it won't stop short." I thought of the children, standing in that hallway with eyes like stars. I thought of Sierra's words, "We remember how this ends." And I felt the terrible weight of a truth none of us wanted to face. The mutiny wasn't over. It had only just begun. The mutiny left scars that never closed. After that night, the station was no longer a single crew but 2 opposing camps living under the same roof. We shared corridors, shared air, but not trust. Every meal, every watch rotation felt like walking a knife's edge. The Protectors spent more time near the children's quarters than their own bunks. The skeptics huddled in dark corners, whispering about plans. And in the middle of it all stood Captain Hale, clinging to authority like a drowning man clutching driftwood. But power was slipping from him. And when desperation takes root, people do dangerous things. It happened on the 6th day after the blackout. The skeptics had been quieter than usual, too quiet. I should have noticed, should have asked questions. But I was too busy trying to keep peace between the factions, too consumed with my own fear of what the children really were. That night, I woke to the sound of engines roaring. At first, I thought it was a dream. Then I realized the vibration running through the station's hull wasn't from the main reactor. It was from the hangar bay. I sprinted through the corridors, heart hammering. The emergency lights flickered as I reached the hangar, and there, through the viewing glass, I saw them, the skeptics, nearly 24 of them, cramming supplies into a transport shuttle. Weapons clattered against the floor as they armed themselves. The shuttle's engines blazed brighter, ready to launch. They were abandoning us. Worse, they were abandoning the children. I slammed my hand against the comm panel. "They're taking the shuttle?" His voice crackled back, raw with fury. "Stop them." I didn't hesitate. The door hissed open, and I ran into the hangar, shouting, "You can't leave! You'll kill us all!" A familiar face turned. Commander Brandt, once Hale's right hand, now leader of the skeptics. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched tight. "You don't get it?" he barked. "Those children aren't saviors, they're executioners. Every minute we stay with them, we march closer to extinction. We're not dying for them." He gestured, and 2 men leveled rifles at me. My breath caught, but I didn't back down. "They saved us from the blackout." I shot back. "You saw it. Without them, none of this would have happened," Brandt roared. "The anomalies, the malfunctions, the blackout itself. They're not warnings, they're traps. We leave them behind, maybe we survive. Maybe we find a planet. Maybe we find hope." His words rang through the hangar like a sermon, and I saw it in the skeptics' eyes. He had convinced them. Then came a sound that froze us all. The children's voices. They walked into the hangar, silent as shadows, their eyes reflecting the shuttle's glow. Not afraid, not pleading, simply present. Cal stepped forward, his voice steady. "If you leave, you'll never make it." Brandt's face twisted. "Stay out of this. You won't reach the nearest star." Cal continued. "You'll drift. Your engines will fail. You'll die in the dark. And no one will remember you." "Lies!" Brandt snarled, though his voice cracked. "You want us trapped here." Amara tilted her head, watching him with sorrow. "We don't want anything. We only see what happens." The skeptics wavered. Some lowered their weapons, glancing nervously at one another. But Brandt pushed forward, spitting venom. "Then watch this!" He shoved past the others, stormed up the ramp into the shuttle, and slammed the controls. The engines screamed louder, filling the hangar with a blinding light. And then, silence. The engines cut out in an instant, the shuttle frozen mid-glow. Not broken, not destroyed, simply paused. I stared, my blood turning to ice. Cal's eyes shimmered brighter. "We told you." Panic erupted. The skeptics shouted, pulling Brandt out of the shuttle, some trying to restart the systems, others backing away as though the children radiated plague. Brandt collapsed to his knees, shaking with fury. You're monsters." Cale's voice was colder now. "We are what comes after." No one dared move. The protectors arrived moments later, weapons drawn, faces grim. For a heartbeat, I thought the hangar would turn into a battlefield. But Hale stormed in, his voice cracking like a whip. "Enough," he roared. "No more sides, no more fighting. You want to run? Fine. But you won't doom the rest of us in the process." His eyes flicked to the children. To Cale, who stared back with that ancient gaze. Hale's face hardened. "We're staying together. For now." But his words rang hollow. Because in that hangar, under the glow of a frozen shuttle, we all saw the truth. The children weren't passengers on this journey. They were the ones steering it. For days after the failed escape, the station was a tomb. No arguments, no shouting, just silence. A heavy, choking silence that pressed against the walls, as if the whole ship itself were holding its breath. The skeptics no longer looked like rebels. They looked like ghosts. Brandt hadn't spoken since the hangar incident. He sat in the corner of the mess hall, rocking slowly, his eyes fixed on nothing. The protectors didn't celebrate victory. They kept close to the children, yes, but their eyes darted with unease. Protection had begun to feel less like loyalty and more like survival. And Captain Hale, he was unraveling. I could see it in his face, in the way his hands trembled when he gripped the railing, in the hollow rasp of his voice when he tried to give orders. Authority was no longer his. It belonged to the children. The turning point came in the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before us, a tapestry of light across infinite black. I had always found comfort in that view. Not anymore. Not since I realized how little I understood about the children who now commanded our fate. That evening, they stood at the glass, Cale, Amara, and Sierra, gazing into the void like they were reading a book written in starlight. I forced myself to approach. My legs trembled. My throat was dry. But I needed answers. "What are you?" The words tore out of me before I could soften them. Not who, what. The children turned together, their faces calm, their eyes glowing faintly in the reflected starlight. Kale spoke first. "We are human, but not like you." And Amara added, her voice soft, "We are the echo of your future." Sira stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "You were born in time. We were born without it." I shook my head, confused. "Without time, that's impossible." "Time is everything. Time is what keeps us alive." Kale raised his hand, palm open. The air shimmered. My watch on my wrist froze mid-tick. The hum of the lights slowed into silence. My own heartbeat faltered, stretching into unbearable stillness. And then, everything snapped back. I staggered, breathless, staring at my watch as its hands spun wildly to catch up. Kale's voice was steady, calm, too calm. "Time is a river for you. For us, it's an ocean. We can step in, step out, drift in currents you cannot see." Amara's eyes glistened with something that almost looked like sorrow. "We were born this way because of what's coming." I whispered. "What's coming?" Sira's voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to shake the air. "The end of your kind." The words hit me like a blow. My knees buckled against the glass railing. "Humanity's end," I stammered. "You mean extinction?" Kale nodded once. "Your wars, your greed, your hunger for stars, it leads to collapse. It always does. We remember it because we lived it, and because we were made to correct it." "Correct it," I echoed. My voice cracked. Amara took my hand. Her skin was warm, but her grip felt impossibly steady. "We are not children in the way you think. We are vessels, the last of humanity, born outside the flow of time, carrying the memory of what comes after." I pulled my hand back, shaking. "So what do you want from us?" "From me?" Sira's answer was chilling in its simplicity. "We want you to listen." I tried to protest, to argue, to demand proof. But then the lights around us flickered. Not the flicker of failing circuits, but something deeper, something unnatural. The stars themselves seemed to waver, stretching and blurring in impossible ways. Kyle lifted his gaze, his voice quiet but sharp as a blade. "It's starting." "What is?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "The collapse," Amara said. "The first fracture in the river of time. What destroyed you before will destroy you again. Unless you let us change it." That night, I couldn't sleep. The children's words echoed in my mind, burning like fire. They weren't passengers. They weren't orphans of a broken earth. They were humanity's final attempt to outwit death itself. And now, as the ship drifted deeper into the void, the question gnawed at me. Were they here to save us or to decide who was worth saving? The collapse wasn't a theory anymore. It began like a crack in glass, faint and almost invisible, but spreading fast. We saw it first in the stars, their light bending, splitting, flickering in and out of existence like dying candles. Instruments went wild. Timestamps contradicted each other. Clocks spun forward and backward in the same breath. People aged in moments, then snapped back. Reality itself was unraveling. The crew panicked. Some screamed, some prayed. Some curled into corners with their hands over their ears. Even Hale, proud, unshakable Hale, stood frozen in the command deck, his lips trembling as if words had abandoned him. Through it all, the children stood calm. Kale turned to us, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. "It's here. The end you made for yourselves." Amara's voice was softer, almost tender. "But you don't have to repeat it." The crew erupted in chaos. The skeptics shouted, demanding we throw the children out of the airlock. "They're causing this," Brant screamed, his face twisted with rage and terror. "Get rid of them, and the ship will be free." The protectors argued back, just as desperate. "They're the only ones who can stop it. We've seen what they can do." Voices clashed, hands grabbed at weapons. The deck teetered on the edge of bloodshed. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped forward, my voice breaking but loud enough to cut through the storm. "Nof, we don't have time for this." All eyes turned to me. My heart thundered, but I forced the words out. "You all want answers. So do I. So do we all. But look around you. Time itself is breaking apart. If the children are lying, we're dead anyway. If they're telling the truth, then they're the only chance we've got." I turned to Kale, my throat dry. "What do we do?" Kale stepped closer, his presence both comforting and terrifying. "You let us guide you," he said. "Not as leaders, not as rulers, but as what we are, the memory of your survival. The part of you that outlives extinction." Amara reached out, her hand trembling for the first time. "It means surrender, letting go of control, trusting us to reshape what you call fate." Sira's gaze burned into mine. "We can't promise it will save everyone, but it will save something. The silence after those words was unbearable. Hale was the first to break it. His voice was hoarse but steady. I don't trust them. I don't trust any of this. But I trust what I've seen. And I've seen them do what no human ever could. He turned, staring hard at Brant. We'll follow them, or we die screaming. Brant shook with rage, his fists clenching, his eyes wild. But when the next wave of distortion rolled through the ship, walls bending like liquid, time slowing to a crawl, he fell to his knees, sobbing. The choice was made. The children stepped into the center of the command deck. Their glow spread, not blinding but warm, like the light of a hearth in the dead of winter. Close your eyes, Cale whispered. We obeyed. I felt it first in my chest, the slowing of my heart, the stretching of my breath. Not suffocating, not painful, just unmoored. Time unraveled around us. The ship groaned, the stars folded inward, reality tore open. And yet, within the children's glow there was stillness, a bubble of existence, fragile but unbroken. I saw flashes, not with my eyes, but somewhere deeper, a city rebuilt on scorched earth, children laughing under skies once thought poisoned, a new humanity smaller, humbler, but alive. Then the images shattered, and all that remained was silence. When I opened my eyes, the collapse was gone. The stars burned steady again. The instruments hummed. The walls were still, solid, real. The children stood before us, their glow dimming, their small bodies trembling with exhaustion. Cale's voice was barely a whisper. It's done. Amara smiled weakly. A new path has been written. Asira swayed, her eyes closing. But not for us. And before anyone could move, before anyone could stop it, the three of them dissolved into light. Gone. The crew wept. Some fell to their knees. Others clutched one another like lost children. I stood frozen, staring at the empty space where they had stood. My heart ached, heavier than I'd ever known. They weren't our passengers. They weren't our saviors. They were our sacrifice. The last children born without time had given us ours back. I don't know what comes next, but I know this humanity was given another chance. And whether we deserve it or not, we cannot waste it.